students achieve their goals, and that is exactly what we're in the business of doing. So thank you.
Thanks, John. So questions for any of these folks? Just one more fact, a learning point. Something I've learned from these folks, but you already heard how sadly few of those who enter post-secondary education complete, let alone complete on time. But an even more sobering fact to me, confirm this if I have it wrong, Stan, is that of those who need remediation, that very high percentage, only 1 in 4 who enter that remediation class will graduate from college. That's correct. And so we've got to do a better job of that. It's bad enough that many students need basic skills just to get started, but if 3 of 4 are spending their own money, we're spending money on their behalf, and then not finishing, that's a problem we've got to do much better at, and that's where Tom and John's campuses and obviously this grant and the redesign comes in.
Can you give a couple of specific examples of what Indiana is doing or what it's proposing to do in America's Award?
Yes, and I had meant to compliment President Snyder. Ivy Tech is really becoming a national leader on this, and they are currently transforming all their technical programs to an accelerated model that would be more block schedules, where you would take, rather than going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you'd go every day of the week, and you can finish in a more timely way, higher graduation rates. The remediation that we talk about, rather than taking it as a serial where you get flushed out, it would be embedded in the program. And that's a significant part of what they intend to do. Plus, they intend to do that with regular academic classes, is embed remediation in the regular classes. And they're really becoming a leader. What Indiana University is doing at the regional campuses is really having a core curricula working with Ivy Tech that could transfer across the state. And in a more mobile society like we have in Indiana, this means students won't have classes that they won't be able to transfer from one campus to another. So that's part of the proposal, but both these efforts have started already, and I think we're just adding kind of the jet fuel to help them take the next step.
So who receives the money?
Well, the application had to have the support of the governor. I think in Indiana's case, technically, the Indiana Commission for Higher Education is the fiscal agent, but in every case, the governor was the lead applicant for the proposal.
The application was that $500,000 would go to Ivy Tech for their redesign, $250,000 would go to the regional campuses, and $250,000 will be used through the commission to do things like data mapping, to look at extra ways that we're going to be able to figure out how they can provide successes at those campuses. We've hired a couple additional data people that will be working with it in this regard. So it will primarily be used at the institutions and will be passed through, but we will have some of it to be able to see if we can look at how you improve block scheduling and our cohort learning and what students have to know, some software, some audits of the degrees that are, the credits that are required at the institutions now, so we'll be doing some auditing through the commission as well. So that's essentially how the money will be divided.
Elaborate on how the money will be spent. Does it take $250,000 to go on schedule, for instance? What is the money itself?
Well, I mean, one of the first things that we'll be doing is to be recruiting what we're calling a remediation czar nationally to come in, who is an expert in this, and we hope this will be completed in the next really few weeks, because we know what we know, and we need people to come in with fresh ideas and new thoughts. We think that's going to be the #1 step. We think also that in this program that we're starting this fall, which is a program that we call Ivy Institute, which we'll be talking more later, is we're going to use a completely different form of remediation. So if you're in information technology, you'll be learning your math and your writing skills while you're taking your information technology courses, and that will require additional resources. So we think this is a good adjunct. I think those are 2 good examples. John?
Sure. I guess for us, the first thing would probably be software development, sometimes software purchasing for some of these mapping programs. Obviously, the work of training people to use them and training students to use these tools in a very effective way. For some of the other learning modules, a lot of it will probably be taking people out of the classroom and replacing them in the classroom so that they can really focus on this particular task. I'm a big believer that you don't get things done unless it's really somebody's job to get them done. And so if completion is always somewhere far down on lots of people's to-do lists, it doesn't happen. And I think that the experience shows that. So this is an opportunity to put it at the top of someone's or a few people's to-do list and really to support the students, the faculty, and advisors to make that happen.
Governor, may I ask, what incentive do the universities have to do this better? I'm the mother
What
of 3
incentive?
kids. My third year college. I'm living this. I'm
Yeah.
living this.
Yeah.
I don't see the incentive that our state universities have to do it better.
Maureen, the straight answer to that is we are moving to, and it was mentioned earlier, to pay the universities that part of their budget that comes from the state. Well, you'd be surprised how much attention they pay to it. I agree with you, frankly, that I'd like to see it higher, and I hope over time it will be. But it's read the National Education Press. It is viewed as a revolutionary step that in Indiana the schools are beginning now to be paid not by how many people come in the door, but how many go out the door, and with what level of success. And I certainly believe that it's already, I've already seen the positive effect. There's so much more discussion now about these terrible completion rates. I didn't hear that the first year or two, and understandably, because it didn't matter in anybody's subsidy. Now it does, and I think it's a very good question whether we shouldn't, based on the difference we've already seen, bump that up over time.
So,
Slightly? Yeah, how slightly, Nikki?
let me
I
make
learned what slightly meant, go ahead, finish.
Let me add one comment to this, because we've used terms that aren't, that you as a mother of college students, cohort means the 25 students that were in this class go to class together for some period of time. That's what cohort means. And block scheduling means that we at the colleges will try and get all the scheduling done so the student doesn't end up with 2 years to a community college degree and find out they have to stay 1 or 2 semesters because they can't get that extra course. Those are the things that I think we're going to be incumbent on us, so that in 4 years or in 2 years, you can take all the courses. Our nurses go to school for 2.5 years, and they start together and they finish together, and our graduation rates once they're in nursing are above 90%. We're trying to learn from that.
Okay, something slightly different.
There's a right to work committee hearing going on, and
Yeah.
Mitch testified in support of moving to that. I wondered if you will be actively pushing and supporting moving Indiana's right to work.
What Mitch Robe testified to was that factually it costs us a lot of shots at new job and new investments. That's just a statement of fact. And I've made the same point before. We know from our own experience, we know from the constant comments of people who site select for businesses that something like 1/4 to 1/3 of their customers won't look at a state without such a law. We have a very high batting average in Indiana's case if we get a shot. In many years, it's been 90% success. So we can beat other states if the business involved will let us have a look. That's what he testified to, and that's an important fact. There are others, though, and the committee's there to hear the competing considerations on this very important and complex issue. And that's our input at this point. We're planning to listen to all the testimony that comes in before we'll have a stance.
He told us afterwards that he definitely supports the right to work bill for the next session, but if you would have to make the commitment of we should ask him, so.
If you had his job to bring, and all you had to do was compete successfully against other states, you might have his viewpoint, which I'm sure he clarified was his viewpoint, giving you an honest answer. It costs us 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 of all the opportunities that we don't have such a law. And that's an important fact, but it's not the only fact.
So does this mean that you may, come January, be in support of a budget?
Yeah, maybe. I want to hear the evidence. I want to talk to all the people who have, who would have to come together to make such a thing occur in Indiana. I wasn't in favor of its consideration in this last session, as you all know, because we hadn't had this kind of an open process and an airing of all the issues. So let's have that airing, and then we'll have something more definitive to say.
You were also concerned that it would wreck so much of your agenda if what happened indeed happened. Now that so much of your agenda has been passed, does that make it more likely that you'll support it in the next session?
Well, there'll be an agenda for next session, too. You'll not be surprised to hear. But I do think that it worked out in the right way, that it did not derail, for instance, education reform or a strong fiscal outcome through the budget this last spring.
Sorry, just to be clear, but I understand you said maybe you would support with me, or maybe you would, but you're okay with it being talked about next session. Because this past session, I mean, you wanted to come out because of the other issues.
Ultimately, it's for the General Assembly to decide what to discuss, and it will be again. But when it came up rather suddenly, in the last session, I did say that I thought it wasn't the right time.
And is the next session a better time?
Well, it'd be a better time, you know, is it the right time? Let's all discuss that together.
Governor, I'd love to hear your perspective on that situation in Washington. What do you think? What do you think's going on? What would be a reasonable compromise?
Yeah.
For instance, if you're a presidential candidate.
Yeah, all right. I mean, far and away, the biggest problem here is the intransigence of the president and his allies. Everybody knows, or everybody who approaches this subject honestly knows, we have a huge overspending problem in this country. We cannot possibly generate the revenues to pay for it. We can't go on borrowing 40 cents of every dollar, which we've been doing. And so the starting point, not the ending point, should be some meaningful step to reduce the blowout levels of spending we're at today, and to start reducing the unaffordable commitments that we've made for tomorrow. And so, you know, this elephant's going to have to be eaten one bite at a time, and the right first bite would be something that demonstrates to Americans, and by the way, to the markets, that we don't intend to spend and borrow ourselves over the cliff. And I would also say to those who agree with what I just said, you're never going to solve this problem in one great step. It's going to take actually years of steps if you look at the arithmetic. And therefore, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you can get, as they've been close to till the president refused, if they can get a meaningful first step on spending, and of course you've got to raise the debt ceiling at some point, pay our past bills, they ought to do that, and in the next morning start discussing step two.
Put yourself back in your old seat for a second with your old blade. If there's nothing by August 2nd, which bills do you pay, which bills do you not pay?
Well, that's the president's decision, but you know, I think you start with the those things that, for the moment, we call entitlements, and you pay the interest. You pay the debtors first. I'm sorry, the creditors. You pay the creditors, and you probably send out the various social welfare checks, Social Security, and the rest. But you know, it's not really a thinkable option. Ultimately, the nation's got to make good on its debts. It's not the fault of the people that are voting now. Many of them weren't there to vote for these unaffordable expenditures and unkeepable promises. And so again, I think the best answer was for the president to stop his demands for no real spending cuts and tax increases that are real, and to for those who correctly see the problem as spending, to get as much as they can get and then immediately start talking about the next step.
Does the state have to have a plan in case of default?
Well, to the extent we do, it's to be prepared, as we are almost uniquely, with money in reserve. If hypothetically the federal government really did have a temporary collapse of its activities, you know, we could cover, for instance, if Medicaid checks didn't come. Other states would be up a creek.
Yeah, we've seen some of our members of Congress and some candidates for Congress say that maybe a default would be a good thing.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Their intentions are good, but I don't think they've thought through the potential consequences to the country.
What would this mean for Hoosiers? I think a lot of people on the street don't understand what this really would mean for higher interest rates. I mean,
Oh, a giant leap in interest rates probably an end to investment in the country means fewer jobs. You'd probably have a big run-up in commodity prices like gasoline, because the world would assume that instead of doing what's right, starting to limit our spending, the world would assume we're just going to print money and inflate away some of the debt we have. And the first thing you'd see is probably $5, $6 gas, followed by a big increase in the interest rates you pay for any money you've borrowed.
Governor, NDOT yesterday announced that it finalized plans for Section 4 of the I-69 extension.
Yeah.
There's 2 left to plan, fund, and build.
Yeah.
They're the only 2 that won't be under construction when you leave office.
Right.
Do you anticipate doing anything to try to get those plans finalized, find new funding mechanisms for what's going to be left to do when you leave in the next 18 months?
Well, we're going to just move as fast as we can, and it may be possible to begin the process of design and so forth on at least stage 5, the one from Bloomington on up to 465. We've been moving ahead of schedule so far, and I'm always pressing to see if we can get further ahead of schedule. You know, funding not going to be a particular problem because it'll be an expensive item among others, but we'll have taken care of the vast majority of the expense. And as you know, the expense keeps coming down. Being able to build now when the markets are really good for this, other states aren't building much. We're getting underruns on every single bid. And being able to build more quickly always saves money because you're not paying in costs that will go up at some point. So we'll just get as far as we can get. I would point out by the time that the first 4 sections are finished, you'll be connected to a 4-lane divided highway basically from there on. And so it'll be, I'm sure the road will be completed, but you'll have a lot of the functionality that we've needed to try to bring some economic life to southwest Indiana. You have an awful lot of it when you've got those first 4 in place. Okay, thank you.